There's so much to say. I'm going to try and sort of like keep it fairly compressed so that there's lots of time for discussion. But as mentioned, I know we've got a few people from outside the UK in the audience, and for many years I presented a programme called Tomorrow's World and made all sorts of wild and wonderful predictions about the future. One of which I remember very distinctly. I stood down in Devon at Goon Hilly and said, this is the dawn of a new digital era, and that was 25 years ago, and it's been the longest dawn in history, really. I set up TeenTech 4 years ago because I could see that there was a real gap between the real talent and ability and the promise of young people and how they perceived the opportunities in science, technology, engineering and maths, and how they viewed certain subjects and how they misunderstood some of what they were doing at school because the relevance of it totally escaped them. And I felt it was just a tragedy, really, that on the one hand you had all of this talent and ability, and on the other hand you had organisations and companies crying out for young people with the right skills. And I just felt that it was important to do something practical. And I'd spent, 25 years, ever since I started work at the BBC, talking about it. So TeenTech was just an effort to do something practical. And it's been quite an interesting learning curve for me. This is 300 teenagers. It's quite a scary moment when you stand in front of them for the first time. This is the only time that they ever sort of like sit and listen during TeenTech. But we ask them just to draw their impressions of people who work in the real world of engineering and maths and science. And you know, some of the images are quite scary. We also ask them to use voting buttons, and this is one of the questions. And on the one hand, you think, oh well, that's not too bad. But you can see that half of them really do not really get the fact that maths is so significant to everything they do, whether it's in daily life or whether it's going to be in their future career. These are some of the images that they have of people who work in the professions that we're trying to draw them into. And they know that those are stereotypes, but the point is they don't have enough real-life examples of what it might be like to work in those areas. And you can only aspire to being things that you either have seen, understand, or indeed want to be. And wanting to be something is really important because that makes you go through because some bits of maths and physics are hard. And if you know what you want to be, I wanted to be a vet, that's why I persisted with them. Understanding that you can be a mathematician and have a decent haircut, I think is important for young people. And also seeing what people can do, because as we're hearing time and time again, looking at for a young person struggling with equations in the classroom, but understanding that this could actually improve how a snowboard operates, or can help you untangle what has gone wrong when there's been a major accident, is really interesting to them, and they suddenly see why it might be important to get a grip on things like quadratic equations. Sue mentioned Apps for Good. We've worked with Apps for Good for about 4 years. They helped us develop a really cool session at TeenTech. And we do it with real-life app designers. I mean, Dave is one of the top app designers in the country. Incidentally, he's just had a marvellous new app on Shakespeare. And of course, the thing about that app is in many ways, obviously it uses some very profound mathematics, but it also does something in English. I mean, I loved pulling out all of the various different sort of quotes about love and death all the way through Macbeth. In a sense, that was like it equates to a lot of the mathematical and rather dull calculus. I mean, some students would find that dull, and it helps students to really enjoy Shakespeare without making it sort of, it's not giving them the answers, but it's taking away what for some is a rather sort of like tedious data gathering process, because why would you do that manually when it can actually be done rather cleverly with an app? For students, I mean, the way I sort of see young people is that if they do things which are essentially problem-solving and task-based, then they have a bit more patience with some of the things that they're being asked to do, which are rather more academic. So at TeenTech, what we do is we kind of show them the point of, why, getting to grips with certain things in maths, and using computers and the speed at which you can do things. And we focus very much on what we see as tomorrow's industries, things like 3D printing. These students have just made all sorts of calculations in terms of the way that certainly sort of engineering decisions really about this skeleton bob, and their team member is now having a virtual experience down one of the Olympic runs, and they're all watching her, and they've rather miscalculated, because one of the things that they were asked to bear in mind was the fact that she's inexperienced on the skeleton bob, and they're a bit overambitious, so what they're watching is her slamming into lots of trees on her way down. Students love, technology. They have it in their pockets. They are obsessed with it. They know everything about it. They don't always make that connection between the technology that they, covet and the fact that they can be creating and building it. And last week we were in Coventry doing one of these events, and a really lovely kid called George came up to me and had a bit of a chat. And George, I asked him, what have you learnt today? And he said, there's a lot of maths about, isn't there? There's a lot of maths in technology. This was a seminal moment for George. He loved technology. He had no idea there was so much maths in it. Now he could suddenly see why is, the point of maths. This sort of shows a bit of a shift from the beginning to the end of a day at TeenTech. So that's where they stand at the beginning of the day. By the end of the day, it's moved. I'm not pretending we turn them all into engineers and mathematicians, but it just shows that they suddenly begin to see the point because they've seen real-life examples. The real tragedy is that these young people are brimful with ideas. We asked them to think about ideas that would make life better in 2050. They're not short of ideas. The ideas walls are just extraordinary. And young people, actually, some of whom struggle at the moment in the classroom. I took this picture when this young lad had got 25 ideas up. He had 50 by the end of the day. And when I spoke to his teacher, and his teacher said, both of his brothers have been excluded and he's next on the list, that kid could suddenly see a point and was focusing and was like really honing in, and for the first time was actually having a positive impression of what learning might actually about, what the point of learning was. The kind of ideas that were coming up on that wall were just so good, and it was just ridiculous just to give one or two an iPod. And so what we decided to do was to set up an awards scheme. And this is about solving real-life problems. So we looked at areas where we felt the opportunities and jobs would be in the future, very, very broad categories, sort of like transport, environment, healthcare, entertainment. And we're challenging young people between 11 and 16 to come up with ideas that would make life better, simpler and easier, to work on projects. They are allowed to draw in help from companies, from universities, from further education, colleges, because the whole point is just to help them see the relevance of what they're doing, and also to be guided. So it's perfectly okay, for instance, because you could go in and say, actually, do you know what? Have you thought about what we'll do is we'll just run some calculations through on a computer. Let's just try out your idea. And that's the point. It's not about the winning. It is very much about the taking part. And just so that they get a perspective which is quite broad, because we live in we have to constantly think about the world. Why are we doing all of this? We are allowing the students to pair up with teams elsewhere in the world, and because obviously this is the pilot year and it is a bit ambitious, we've partnered with the equivalent of the Royal Society in Australia. So as I speak, there are teams in schools in Queensland, very different from the kind of experiences that will be being had by students in the UK, ready to crack some of these global problems. And I'm just so looking forward to what these young people do. It's going to be a very sort of exciting time. Anyway, that launches next week. It's a totally blatant plug, because I thought, actually, we've got quite a few people from outside the UK. They may have some young people who'd like to take part and partner. But the message is, there is so much talent out there, and it is about, helping those young people fulfil their potential and see that, maths isn't hard. Maths, is a beautiful thing, and it can help you to crack some very significant problems, and also, for the most part, make life very much easier. Thank you.